I received a video notification from my aunt, clearly meant for her gossip group. In it, my entire family feasted on a banquet I funded, toasting to my lonely, pathetic life while laughing at my gullibility. I didn't reply. I just waited for the first of the month. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. I was lying in the dark, the cool compress on my forehead doing absolutely nothing to dull the rhythmic thumping behind my eyes. It was a migraine, one of the bad ones, the kind that made the world tilt on its axis and turned every photon of light into a physical assault. I had been working 80-hour weeks for 3 months straight to close the chaotic merger for the tech firm where I worked as a senior software architect, and my body had finally decided to stage a violent protest. I was curled up on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days, feeling incredibly small and incredibly alone. My apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. It was a stark contrast to the life I funded for everyone else. The phone buzzed on the coffee table. The vibration against the wood sounded like a jackhammer in my sensitive state. I groaned, reaching out a trembling hand to silence it, assuming it was a work email I needed to ignore. It wasn't work, it was a WhatsApp notification. Aunt Brenda sent a video. My thumb hovered over the screen. Brenda never sent me videos. Her messages to me were strictly transactional, usually arriving around the 25th of the month. Hazel, honey, the heating bill was higher this time because of the draft. Or, Mark needs new tires for the interview. It's an investment in his future. I squinted against the glare, tapping the play button. I assumed it was a mistake, or maybe a video of a leak she wanted me to pay a plumber to fix. The video buffered for a second, then resolved into a shaky, vertical shot. The setting was unmistakable. It was the dining room of the Victorian house I paid the mortgage on. The table, mahogany, antique, restored on my dime last year, was groaning under the weight of a feast. There were platters of lobster, bottles of what looked like vintage champagne, and a tiered cake that must have cost $300. I frowned. I had transferred $4,000 3 days ago because Brenda had called me in tears, claiming the boiler had exploded and they were freezing. "Turn it around, Mom, look at this spread," a voice crowed. It was my cousin Mark. The camera panned wildly, inducing a fresh wave of nausea in my head before settling on Mark's flushed, laughing face. He was holding a lobster claw in one hand and a crystal flute in the other. "To the sponsor," Mark shouted, raising the glass. The camera swung around to the head of the table. Aunt Brenda was there, looking resplendent in a silk blouse I knew I had bought for her birthday 2 years ago. She was beaming, her face flushed with alcohol and triumph. "To the ATM," Brenda corrected him, her voice shrill and mocking. Oh, God, if she could see us now. Probably sitting in that dark little box of hers, eating instant noodles and coding her life away. The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't just them. The camera panned to the side, and my heart stopped. Sitting there, quietly sipping her wine, was Gabriella, my mother. "She thinks she's saving us," Mark sneered, taking a bite of the lobster. "She actually thinks she's the head of the family because she signs the checks. It's pathetic, really. 32, no husband, no kids, just a bank account and a cat." "She should be grateful," Brenda announced, waving her fork for emphasis. "We give her a purpose. Without us, who would she be? Just some lonely spinster with a computer. We're doing her a favor by taking her money. It makes her feel important." I waited for my mother to speak. I waited for Gabriella to slam her hand on the table, to defend the daughter who paid for her insulin, her rent, her car insurance. I waited for her to say, "She works herself to death for us." On the screen, Gabriella just smiled a thin, tight smile and clinked her glass against Brenda's. "She is very dutiful," my mother said softly. "Dutiful? She's a doormat, Gaby, Brenda laughed, wiping a tear from her eye. A pathetic, gullible doormat. But hey, as long as the check's clear, she can pretend to be the CEO of the family all she wants. The video ended abruptly, presumably as Brenda went to stop recording, but she must have hit send to the wrong contact instead of saving it. I stared at the black screen of my phone. The migraine was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hollow sensation in the center of my chest, a void where my love for them used to be. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there in the dark, the silence of my apartment suddenly feeling heavy and suffocating. The betrayal wasn't just in the theft of the money, it was in the laughter. It was worse than the diagnosis itself. For the next hour, I didn't move. I couldn't. It felt as though my blood had been replaced with lead. I replayed the video 4 times. I needed to memorize it. I needed to etch every pixel of their mockery into my brain so that I would never, ever forget it. A pathetic, gullible doormat. The words bounced around the empty walls of my living room. I looked around at my dark little box. It was a luxury apartment in the city, yes, but it was sparse. I hadn't bought new furniture in 5 years because Brenda always had an emergency. I hadn't taken a vacation since my 20s because Mark always needed bail money or tuition for a course he would inevitably quit. I drove a 10-year-old sedan so Brenda could drive a leased SUV. My phone buzzed again, a text from Brenda. Oops, ignore that video, hun, but dial, just silly family stuff. Hope you are feeling better. Don't forget the property tax bill is coming next week. Love you. She hadn't even checked what she sent. She assumed it was just a random clip of the floor or the ceiling. She was so arrogant, so secure in her control over me, that she didn't even bother to verify if she had just nuked her own gold mine. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky but my mind sharpening with a terrifying clarity. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The woman looking back at me in the mirror looked different. Her eyes were red-rimmed and tired, yes, but the softness was gone. The desperation to please, the hunger for validation that had defined my relationship with my family for a decade, it had evaporated. I walked into my home office, the room where I spent those 80-hour weeks earning the money they were currently eating, and sat down at my triple monitor setup. I logged into my bank account. The numbers were stark. The transfer for the boiler repair was there, $4,000. I logged into the credit card portal for the card I had given Brenda for emergencies only. Lobster Shack, $600. Liquor store, $850. Bakery, $300. I felt a physical sickness rising in my throat, a bile composed of years of swallowed pride and ignored red flags. I had let them do this. I had enabled it because I thought money was the only language of love they understood. I thought if I paved their lives with gold, they would eventually look at me with respect. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it simply, the audit. My phone rang. It was Mark. I stared at the screen, watching his name flash. He was probably calling to check in, which was code for softening me up before asking for the newest gaming console or a down payment on a motorcycle. I answered, "Hello, Mark." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, metallic, devoid of warmth. "Hey, cuz, Hayes match, how's the big city?" He sounded tipsy. The party was clearly still going. "Listen, I was thinking about what you said about me getting certified for IT stuff. You know, following in your footsteps. I found this boot camp, it looks sick, but the registration fee is like $2,000 due tonight." He was lying. I could hear the clink of silverware in the background. I could hear Brenda laughing. "Send me the link," I said. My hand was hovering over the keyboard, my cursor blinking on the automatic payments tab of my banking portal. "Awesome, you're the best, Hazel. Seriously. We were just talking about you, saying how generous you are." "Were you?" I asked. "That's nice to hear." "Yeah, totally. Anyway, I'll text it. Thanks, cuz." He hung up. He thought he had won again. He thought I was the same Hazel who would eat instant noodles so he could eat lobster. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just an ATM. I was a senior architect. My entire career was built on finding system vulnerabilities, identifying efficient workflows, and, most importantly, deleting redundant code. And I had just identified 3 major redundancies in my life. To understand why this betrayal shattered me, you have to understand the history. My father died when I was 7. It was just me and Gabriella against the world, or so I thought. But Gabriella was fragile. She was a woman who couldn't exist without a stronger personality to orbit. When Dad died, she didn't turn to me. She collapsed into her sister, Brenda. Brenda was the opposite of fragile. Brenda was a force of nature, a hurricane of hairspray, cheap perfume, and loud opinions. She took us in, yes, but the price of admission was total subservience. I grew up hearing that we were burdens. I grew up watching Gabriella shrink until she was little more than Brenda's shadow, agreeing with everything. Her sister said, adopting her opinions, her grudges, and her cruelty. When I got my scholarship to university, Brenda told me I was abandoning the family. When I got my first 6-figure job, Brenda told me I was getting above my raising. But the moment the first paycheck cleared, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly, Brenda had health issues that prevented her from working. Suddenly, Mark, who was 3 years older than me, needed help finding himself. I paid because I wanted to buy my mother's freedom. I paid because I wanted to prove Brenda wrong, that I wasn't a burden, I was the savior. I looked at the photo on my desk. It was from my graduation. Me in the gown, Gabriella looking anxious, and Brenda standing in front of both of us, wearing a white dress that looked more like a bridal gown, smiling for the camera. Brenda, the primary antagonist of my life. She called herself a lifestyle consultant, which as far as I could tell meant she spent her days criticizing the neighbors and scrolling through Instagram shopping pages. She was 55, dyed her hair a harsh, metallic blonde, and had a way of looking at you that made you feel like you had dirt on your face. She was a master of the backhanded compliment. "Oh, Hazel, that dress is so brave for your body type. You're so lucky you don't have a husband to worry about, you can just focus on your little computer games." And then there was the house, the family home. It was actually my grandmother's house, left to both Brenda and Gabriella. But somehow, Brenda and Mark ended up living in the main floors, while my mother slept in the converted guest room. I paid the mortgage, the taxes, the utilities, and the upkeep. I pulled up the last year's expenses on my screen. The numbers were staggering. $3,200 a month for the mortgage, $800 for groceries, which I now knew included lobster and champagne, $400 for Gabriella's medication. I made a note to check if that was actually going to the pharmacy. $1,500 a month for Mark's allowance while he looked for work. Mark, the golden child. At 35, his resume was a blank page. He had almost started a DJ business, almost become a personal trainer, almost launched a crypto startup. He was charming in a greasy way, the kind of guy who peaked in high school and was furious that the world hadn't rolled out a red carpet for him. And my mother, Gabriella, the enabler. Her silence in that video hurt more than Brenda's screeching laughter. She sat there, drinking the wine I paid for, listening to them call her daughter a failure, and she said nothing. She agreed. She is very dutiful. It was a dismissal, a reduction of my entire existence to a utility. I was the electricity, the running water, necessary but unnoticed until I stopped working. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Today was the 28th. The mortgage payment was set to auto-draft on the 1st. The allowance transfers were scheduled for the 1st. The utility bills were on auto-pay. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the leather creaking in the silence. Brenda had made a career out of manipulating emotions. She played the victim, the martyr, the struggling matriarch. She relied on social pressure and guilt to keep me in line. But she had made a fatal error. She had introduced technology into her bullying. She had put her malice on a digital record. I cracked my knuckles. The migraine was a distant memory now. I felt a cold, hard focus settling over me, the same focus I used when dismantling a corrupt database. I wasn't going to scream at them. I wasn't going to send a tearful text asking, why? I was going to execute a system purge. The cursor blinked on my screen, a steady, rhythmic pulse that matched the beating of my heart. I was no longer the crying niece or the dutiful daughter. I was the senior architect, and I was looking at a corrupt system that needed to be dismantled. I started with the immediate bleeding. I logged into the utility accounts. I had been paying the electricity, gas, and water directly for 5 years. I navigated to the Stored Payment Methods tab. With a few clicks, I deleted my credit card information from every single portal. Next, the credit cards. I had given Brenda a supplementary card on my account for emergencies regarding the house. I pulled up the transaction history. It was a roadmap of indulgence. A boutique pet store, they didn't have a pet. A high-end salon in the city center. A series of cash withdrawals at a casino 40 miles away. I called the bank. I need to report a card lost or stolen, I said, my voice steady. Cancel the supplementary card ending in 4098 immediately. Certainly, ma'am. Would you like to reissue a new one to the secondary user? No, I said, and the word tasted like sweet, cold wine. Remove the user entirely, and please flag the account for any attempted unauthorized access. My aunt can be persistent. Once the financial firewalls were up, I ved to the investigation. I needed leverage. I needed more than just, you spent too much money, because Brenda would spin that. She would cry poverty, she would claim she was buying things for my mother, she would claim the cash withdrawals were for under-the-table home repairs. I pulled up the invoice Brenda had sent me last week, the boiler explosion. Smithson and Sons heating $4,000. I zoomed in on the PDF. The logo looked pixelated. The font was Standard Times New Roman. There was no tax ID number listed at the bottom. I opened a new tab and searched for Smithson and Sons heating. Nothing. No website, no Yelp page, no Better Business Bureau listing. I searched the address listed on the invoice. It was a vacant lot behind a strip mall 3 towns over. I felt a cold fury settle in my stomach. It wasn't just greed, it was fraud. She had typed this up on her laptop, probably the MacBook I bought her for Christmas, and exported it as a PDF to steal $4,000 from me. But the worst discovery came when I called the pharmacy. For 3 years, I had been transferring $400 a month to Brenda for my mother's specialized copay for her insulin and heart medication. Brenda had told me the insurance didn't cover the good brand, and that the generic made Mom sick. Hi, this is Hazel, Gabriella's daughter, I told the pharmacist. I'm just doing an audit of her medical expenses for tax purposes. Could you tell me what the monthly out-of-pocket has been for her prescriptions this year? There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. Let me see here, Gabriella, date of birth, okay. Well, Ms. Hazel, her insurance covers everything fully since she hit the deductible in January. Her copay has been $0 for the last 11 months. The room spun. 0, I whispered, gripping the edge of my desk. Yes, ma'am, 0, and looking at the history, she's actually been picking up the generic brand since last year. The doctor noted it was working better for her. I hung up the phone. She wasn't just stealing for lobster and handbags. She was using my mother's illness, my fear of losing the only parent I had left, as a line item in her grift. She was monetizing my mother's survival. I looked at the video file saved on my desktop. The thumbnail showed Brenda laughing. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. A law school friend of mine, David, who now specialized in property law. Hazel, long time no see, David answered. I need a favor, David, a big one. The house my aunt and mother live in. The deed is in my name, right? It was transferred from the estate directly to me. Yeah, I remember handling that. You're the sole owner. They're tenants at will. Good, I said. I need you to draft an eviction notice, and I need it to be bulletproof. The first of the month fell on a Tuesday. I took the day off work. I knew I wouldn't be able to concentrate on code when my personal life was about to implode. I sat in my living room, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the clock on my phone. 9:00 a.m. This was usually when the automatic transfers hit Brenda's account. 9:05 a.m. 9:10 a.m. The first text came at 9:12 a.m. Brenda, hey honey, think the bank is having a glitch, the transfer didn't show up yet. Just letting you know so you can call them. Zoe. I didn't reply, I took a sip of coffee. 9:30 a.m. Brenda, Hazel, are you getting my texts? I'm at the grocery store checkout and the card was declined. It was so embarrassing. Please fix this ASAP. 9:45 a.m. Mark, yo, need that transfer for the course registration. Deadline is at noon, don't leave me hanging. 10:00 a.m. The phone call started. First Brenda, then Mark, then Brenda again, then the landline from the house. I watched the screen light up, vibrate, and go dark, over and over again. It was a digital tantrum. I could practically hear the shrieking happening on the other end. At 10:30 a.m., after the 47th missed call, I decided it was time. I picked up the phone on the second ring. Hello, I said, my voice calm, almost bored. Hazel, Brenda screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Where have you been? Do you have any idea what you've done? I am standing in the parking lot of Whole Foods with a cart full of groceries, essential groceries for your sick mother, and the card is declined. And the transfer isn't there. Fix it. Now. I canceled the card, Brenda, I said. There was a stunned silence on the line. A vacuum where her entitlement usually lived. You what? I canceled the card. And I canceled the standing order for the transfers. And I canceled the auto pay on the utilities. Are you insane? Her voice went from shocked to venomous in a nanosecond. Have you lost your mind? How are we supposed to eat? How are we supposed to heat the house? You are putting your mother in danger. You selfish, ungrateful little. How is the boiler, Brenda? I interrupted her. What? The boiler, the one that exploded last week, the one you needed $4,000 to fix. It's broken, we're freezing. That's why I need the money, the man is coming today too. I called Smithson and Sons, I lied smoothly. Or rather, I tried to. It's funny, because that company doesn't exist. The address on the invoice is an empty lot behind a Taco Bell. Silence, heavy, suffocating silence. And then, I continued, pressing the advantage, I called the pharmacy. Mom's copay is 0. It has been 0 for a year. So, Brenda, I have a question. Where did the $4,800 I sent for her medicine go? Did it go to the boiler company that doesn't exist? Or did it go to the lobster and champagne I saw in the video? I heard a sharp intake of breath. What video? She hissed. The one you sent me, I said. The one where you toasted to the pathetic ATM. The one where Mark called me a loser. I saw it all, Brenda, every second. I expected shame. I expected an apology. I expected backpedaling. Instead, Brenda laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Oh, is that what this is about? You got your feelings hurt. You're punishing your family because of a joke? Grow up, Hazel. You know how Mark is. We were just blowing off steam. You think you can just cut us off because you're sensitive. I'm cutting you off because you are stealing from me, I said. It's fraud, Brenda, and I'm done funding it. You can't do this, she snarled. That is our home. You have an obligation. Your mother is sick. If you stop paying, she dies. Do you hear me? You are killing your mother. If Mom needs anything, I said, she can ask me herself. But not a single cent goes through your hands ever again. She won't speak to you, Brenda screamed. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell everyone what you've done. I'll tell them you've abandoned us. I'll ruin you. You're welcome to try, I said. But Brenda, you forgot one thing. What? She spat. I'm the one with the receipts. I hung up. My hand was trembling, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of finally, after a lifetime of silence, dropping the hammer. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. Within an hour, my Facebook feed, which I rarely checked, was blowing up. Brenda had posted a long, rambling status update, tagging me, my employer, and every relative we had. Please pray for my sister Gabriella. Her heart is breaking today. Her own daughter, who we have sacrificed everything for, has decided to cut off her life-saving medication and leave her to freeze in her own home. Money changes people. Evil is real. Ungrateful # elder abuse heartbroken. My phone started pinging with messages from distant cousins and aunts I hadn't seen since Christmas. Hazel, is this true? Call your mother immediately. How could you do this to Brenda? I didn't respond to the mob. I waited for the one call that mattered. It came at 7:00 p.m. Hazel. My mother's voice was small, shaky, and sounded like she had been crying for hours. Mom, I said, softening immediately. Mom, are you okay? Do you need anything? I can order groceries to be delivered to the house, but I need you to be the one to accept them. Hazel, why are you doing this? She wept. Brenda is frantic. She says we're going to be on the street. She says you hate us. I don't hate you, Mom, but Brenda has been lying to you, and she's been stealing from me. She hasn't, Mom cried, her voice rising in a rare display of defense. She takes care of everything. She manages the bills because I get confused. She loves us, Hazel. She's my sister. Mom, she charged me $4,000 for a boiler that isn't broken. Is the heat working? Well, yes, but she fixed it with her own money. She told me. She didn't, Mom. And the medicine? I called the pharmacy. It's free. She's been pocketing the money I send for your health. You're lying, Mom whispered. Brenda said you would say that. She said you've become paranoid from working too much. She said the city made you cruel. It broke my heart. It truly did. Brenda had gotten to her first. She had inoculated my mother against the truth, twisting reality so that my evidence looked like malice. I'm not lying, Mom. I have the proof. I don't want your proof, she sobbed. I want my family back. I want you to apologize to your aunt and fix this. We have the neighborhood garden party this weekend. Everyone is coming. How can we host if we can't even buy food? Do you want to humiliate me? The garden party. Of course. Brenda was famous in the neighborhood for her annual summer kickoff. It was how she maintained her social standing. She played the wealthy matriarch, hosting the local doctors and lawyers, feeding them food I paid for, in a house I owned. She's still having the party? I asked, astounded. After claiming you're freezing and starving. It's for charity, Hazel. We can't cancel it. Please just send the money, for me. If you love me, you'll fix this. She hung up. I sat there, the silence of the apartment deafening. She had chosen. Even when presented with the truth, she chose the comfortable lie. She chose Brenda. I realized then that sending screenshots of bank statements wouldn't work. Sending logical arguments wouldn't work. Brenda's hold on the narrative was too strong. She was currently spinning a story where I was the villain, and she was the hero holding the family together against my tyranny. I needed to break the narrative, and I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be spun. My computer pinged, an email from David, my lawyer. Subject, notice of termination of tenancy, and notice to quit. Attachment, eviction notice draft final, PDF. Body, Hazel, here is the paperwork. Since there is no formal lease, they are month-to-month tenants at will. In our state, you have to give 30 days notice. However, given the financial fraud you mentioned, we can also file for an immediate restraining order regarding the financial assets, which might speed things up. But the eviction notice is the big gun. Once this is served, the clock starts. I opened the PDF. It was stark, formal, and devastating. Notice to quit, to Brenda Miller and Mark Miller. You are hereby required to surrender possession of the premises. I looked at the date. Today was Tuesday. The garden party was Saturday. If I mailed it, they might not get it until Monday. Brenda would have her party. She would parade around my house, telling everyone how cruel I was while eating my food. She would cement her version of the story before the truth ever came out. I couldn't let that happen. I picked up my phone and called David back. "David, it's Hazel. Change of plans." "What's up? Do you want to hold off?" "No," I said, a cold determination hardening my voice. "I don't want to mail it. I want to serve it personally." "You can do that," David warned, "but it's going to be volatile. Are you sure you want to be there?" "The garden party is Saturday," I said. "All the neighbors will be there, the people she cares about most, the audience she performs for." "Hazel," David sounded hesitant. "She wanted a show, David. She sent me a video laughing about how pathetic I am. She thinks I'm invisible. She thinks I'm just a checkbook." I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark monitor. I didn't look tired anymore. I looked like a woman who was done paying the bill. "I'm going to the party," I said, "and I'm bringing the receipts." Saturday arrived with the kind of aggressive sunshine that felt like a spotlight. It was perfect weather for a garden party and perfect weather for an exposure. I pulled up to the house at 2:00 p.m. The street was lined with luxury sedans and SUVs, the neighbors, the local elite, the people Brenda had spent 20 years impressing with money that wasn't hers. I parked my 10-year-old sedan right in front of the driveway, blocking a shiny Mercedes. I took a deep breath. In my passenger seat sat a thick manila envelope. Inside were the eviction notices, the bank statements, the fake invoice from Smithson and Sons, and a printout of the pharmacy records showing a $0 copay. I stepped out. I wasn't wearing my usual hoodie and jeans. I was wearing a sharp, tailored blazer and slacks, my boardroom armor. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching loudly under my heels. The gate to the backyard was open. I could hear the clink of glass, the murmur of polite conversation, and the soft strains of jazz music. I rounded the corner and stopped. It was a beautiful scene. The garden was manicured to perfection. Landscaper, $400 a month, paid by me. There were white linen tables set up, laden with catering trays. And there was Brenda, holding court in the center of a group of women, wearing a floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat, laughing theatrically. Mark was by the bar, mixing drinks. My mother was sitting on a bench near the roses, looking small and anxious, clutching a glass of water. Brenda saw me first. Her smile froze. The glass in her hand tilted dangerously. "Hazel," she called out, her voice shrill but trying to maintain a facade of welcome. "What? What a surprise. We didn't think you could make it away from your computer." The conversation around her died down. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me. "I decided to take a break," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the lawn. I walked straight toward her, ignoring the guests who stepped aside. "We have some business to discuss, Brenda." Brenda laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Business? Now, don't be silly, darling. Grab a drink. We're celebrating the community." "Actually," I said, stopping 3 feet from her, "I'm here to clarify some things about the community. Specifically, who is paying for it?" Mark hustled over, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hazel, don't start drama. Not today. Just leave, okay? You'll talk later." "No," I said, turning to him. "We'll talk now." I opened the manila envelope. I pulled out the first document, the Smithson and Sons invoice. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, turning to Brenda's best friend, a woman who lived 2 doors down. "You recommended a heating guy to Brenda last week, didn't you?" Mrs. Higgins blinked, startled. Yes, Mr. Henderson, he's excellent." "Right," I said. "Well, Brenda told me the boiler exploded, and she sent me this bill for $4,000 from a company called Smithson and Sons. Funny thing is, Mrs. Higgins, Smithson and Sons is a vacant lot behind a Taco Bell." I held the invoice up. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. "Hazel," Brenda shrieked, her face turning a mottled red. "How dare you? This is private family business. You are embarrassing your mother." "You embarrassed my mother when you stole the money for her heart medication," I countered, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. I turned to my mother. She had stood up, her hand over her mouth. "Mom," I said, walking over to her. I handed her the pharmacy printout. "Look at it, please, look at the copay column." My mother's trembling hands took the paper. She squinted at the lines. "Zero," she whispered. "It says 0. "For 12 months," I said. "I've been sending Brenda $400 a month for a bill that doesn't exist. She told you I was cheap. She told you I was reluctant. I sent every penny she asked for, and she spent it on lobster and handbags while you worried about being a burden." Brenda rushed forward, grabbing Mark's arm. "She's lying, she's forged these. She's jealous, Gabriella, she's always been jealous of us." "And the house," I continued, ignoring Brenda and addressing the crowd. "You all think this is Brenda's house, don't you? You think she's the benevolent hostess." I pulled out the deed. "This house belongs to me," I announced. "I pay the mortgage, I pay the taxes, I pay for the landscaping you're standing on, and Brenda, she pays nothing. In fact, she charges me a management fee to live here." The silence in the garden was absolute. The jazz music seemed to mock the tension. "But that ends today," I said. I turned back to Brenda and Mark. I handed Mark the thick stack of papers. "This is a formal notice to quit," I said. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises. The locks will be changed on the 31st day. The credit cards are canceled. The bank accounts are frozen. The free ride is over." Mark looked at the papers, his face pale. "You can't do this, we're family." "Family doesn't toast to their benefactor's loneliness," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I saw the video, Mark. I saw you laughing. You called me a pathetic ATM. Well, this ATM is out of order." Brenda let out a wail, a theatrical, desperate sound. She turned to the neighbors, arms outstretched. "She's throwing her own mother on the street. Look at her. She's a monster." All eyes turned to Gabriella. My mother looked up from the pharmacy records. She looked at Brenda, the sister she had worshipped for decades. She looked at the expensive catering. She looked at me, standing tall and alone. "No," Gabriella said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Gaby," Brenda whispered. "No," my mother said, louder this time. She walked over to me and stood by my side. She didn't look at Brenda. She looked at the guests. "My daughter has supported us for 10 years. She has saved my life, and my sister has been stealing from her, and from me." Gabriella took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I am leaving with my daughter," she said. "Brenda, you can figure out your own dinner." The gasp from the crowd was audible. Mrs. Higgins actually set her glass down on a table and turned her back on Brenda. It was the social death knell. Brenda stood there, mouth open, the eviction notice fluttering in Mark's hand. The queen of the neighborhood had been dethroned in her own backyard. "Come on, Mom," I said gently. "Let's go home." The drive back to my apartment was quiet. My mother sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, occasionally wiping her eyes. I didn't push her. I knew her world had just collapsed. The reality she had built around her sister's love had been exposed as a sham. When we got to my place, I set her up in the guest room, the one I had furnished but never used. "It's so clean," she said, looking around. "I like it that way," I smiled. "Mom, you can stay here as long as you want, but Brenda and Mark aren't coming here, ever." She nodded slowly. I know that now." The next month was a blur of legalities and logistics. Brenda tried to fight, of course. She found a cheap lawyer who sent me a threatening letter claiming squatters' rights, but David dismantled it in a single afternoon. With the evidence of fraud I had compiled, the fake invoices, the misappropriated medical funds, David made it clear to be Brenda's lawyer that if they didn't vacate quietly, I would be filing criminal charges for embezzlement and elder financial abuse. They moved out on day 29. I went to the house the day after they left to inspect the damage. It was hollow. They had taken everything that wasn't nailed down, the curtains, the light bulbs, even the toilet paper holders. But the structure was still there. The bones of my grandmother's house were still strong. I stood in the empty dining room, the place where they had filmed that video. The mahogany table was gone. Mark had apparently sold it on Craigslist for cash, but the space felt lighter. The air didn't feel heavy with judgment anymore. I decided to sell it. I didn't want the memories. I used the proceeds to buy a smaller, lovely condo for my mother in a 55-plus community near me. It was in her name. For the first time in her life, she had something that was hers, not Brenda's. My mother changed, too. It was a slow process. At first, she mourned the loss of her sister. But as the months went on and she made her own friends at the community center, I saw a spark in her I hadn't seen since my father died. She started painting again. She stopped apologizing for existing. One evening, about 6 months later, I went over to her new place for dinner. She had made lasagna, my favorite. We were sitting on her balcony, watching the sunset. "Hazel?" she asked, putting her fork down. "Yes, Mom." "I never said thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the house, but for waking me up. I was asleep for a long time. I let them hurt you because it was easier than fighting them. I'm so sorry." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom. We're here now." "I got a letter from Mark," she mentioned, a shadow crossing her face. I tensed. What did he want? "Money," she half laughed, shaking her head. "He's living in a motel in Jersey. He said Brenda is working as a cashier at a grocery store and hates it. He wanted $500. "What did you do?" I asked. My mother took a sip of her iced tea and smiled, a genuine, strong smile. "I sent him a job application for the post office," she said, "and I blocked his number." I laughed. It was a real laugh, free and light. I drove home that night feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The migraine was gone. The ATM was closed. The code had been cleaned, the bugs deleted, and the system was finally running smoothly. I was Hazel. I was a senior architect. And for the first time in my life, I was free.